back, friends. We are back for another live episode of In the Trenches. Excited to be here along with my partner, Brian Bush. And we want to let you know what's going on Conquering Heroes. Thursday edition of Conquering Heroes. The women's lacrosse head coach, Hannah Nielsen, who is, I'm going to make sure I get this right. She is going for her back-to-back 4 times in the NCAA tournament. She's got this program rocking and rolling. They're number 12 in the nation right now, and it's an exciting time for Michigan women's lacrosse. She's going to join me on Thursday, and as we all know, Defend the Block, which is hosted by our very own Brian Bush, the voice of Michigan basketball, alongside Terry Mills. The Big Ten tournament is upon us, and I know the regular season, Brian, didn't end the way that anybody really wanted it to end, but year one in the books, regular season in the books for Dusty May. I want to bring you in at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome in Brian Bush.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate this. Hey, you know what? Before we get to that, I want to say last week we hit 500 In the Trenches episodes and 300 Defend the Block episodes. We've been doing this for a while. It's certainly been a lot of fun. No need to do any sort of, grand celebrations or anything like that. I think we did something like that for the 100th episode, but it was a lot of work. I didn't want to do it. But we've got plenty to talk about. But it is crazy. We are over 1,000 overall episodes if you factor in Conquering Heroes, the radio shows, some of the special things we've done, Michigan football classics from a while back. So it goes quick, doesn't it?
It does. And does, other than the fact that people are still watching and listening, does it mean anything to us?
Yes, I'm very glad that people still follow.
No, I know that. No, I know that the people it does, but for you and I, okay, let's go for 501.
Yeah, well, we're on 501 right now, and we're having one heck of a start.
We're not done with it yet, so it's not in the books. It doesn't count until it's all said and done. We've had some hiccups as we've moved around. The Studio of Champions has moved around Schembechler Hall. It's been in different locations, and the last couple of weeks we had a couple of glitches, and so we're hoping that 501 is the start of the glitch-free era of In the Trenches.
I would make a joke to try to freeze frame, but I'm not good enough at that, and I'd probably chuckle. So we'll just.
And I'd laugh too much. So yeah, yes.
You see, one of my dogs would bark or something, and it would ruin the whole situation. But no, in all seriousness, it's fun, and the cool part is that people stay locked in even when we're in a very sports off season with. In the Trenches now. Obviously, Defend the Block will have some off-season coverage, but hopefully there's still plenty of in-season coverage. A little bleak as of late, but for those watching, we'll have some basketball talk on the bonus portion. For those listening who get the Jack Tuttle interview, which we'll have audio only on Wednesday, be sure to check out the video. We normally do something video only, take some comments, stuff like that, as we expand that aspect. And you mentioned changes and glitches. Now we have nicer cameras, which is, you would think that's good, but actually it might show some more defects and flaws in our game. But
yeah, I don't look great in high def. That's why I'm on the radio most of the time. And so I try and downgrade what the camera has. We could go 4K, we could go 1080. We're all the way down to what? 190 at 72p. Is that what we can go down to?
I've been mostly told 4 out of 10.
Okay. Hey, you'd be good at baseball.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into our 7 from 77. And we start. This will mostly be an episode geared toward the NFL-bound Wolverines with Pro Day coming up in about a week and a half, but did want to touch on where things are with Michigan football, because we're about a week away now from the start of spring practice, which isn't full throttle every day. They stagger things, but that first practice comes up Tuesday, March 18th. What's going on?
Well, it was a quiet week last week because it was spring break here in Ann Arbor, and so a lot of guys out of town trying to get a little breather before they hit the ground running and start spring ball next week officially. No pads next week. You get into it the following week, and there'll be, it looks like there's going to be 12 padded practices. But right now, what's going on is a lot of the players are getting individual work, and we're going to talk to Jack Tuttle at the end. One of the things that he has brought on to is he wants to get into coaching. He's working with the receivers. So it doesn't mean he just has to be with receivers. He can be with the quarterbacks. He can be with anybody else. Juan Castillo is brought in. And I know Juan way back when he was coaching for the Eagles as an offensive line coach. He's been here and gone a couple of different times as an analyst, an offensive analyst, offensive line analyst, and he is here. Eric Campbell, who was a wide receivers coach here, played here. He's back as well. So they've fortified the coaching staff, not just with those that are actual position coaches, but with a lot of other individuals that bring great experience and great knowledge and great opportunity for the players. So when I talk about some of the individual things that are going on, they're getting a chance to talk to Grant as an offensive lineman, and they'll watch film or they'll be given some coaching points. But that individual work, while they're putting together, hey, what are we doing for recruiting and what are we doing for all these other things and game planning and prep for next year and for spring ball, you get an opportunity to work with experienced coaches and, one-on-one opportunities. So you could spend an hour, just an offensive guard, center, tackle with Coach Castillo. You could spend as a receiver an hour, 2 hours watching film with Coach Campbell, or on the field, running routes, catching balls, different things. And just what is it that I need to work on? And throughout the course of the offseason, and then each day kind of growing it a little bit more, working on pass sets, defensive linemen doing the same thing. It's not, I'm just using those as examples, but it's a great opportunity for all of these guys. And I see them maximizing their opportunities. Those coaches aren't able to sit down all day long. They are with players and working on different techniques, working on developing some of the young players, some of those guys that are early enrollees, what to expect when spring ball starts, what to expect when you put the pads on. Here's what we're looking for, and setting the expectations, going through some of the plays and all those different things. So it's an opportunity to really dive deep into your individual needs. And then you start seeing with Grant, some of the offensive line working together and talking about going through different things and different scenarios, some of the guys that are back. And it's, so whether it's your position coach, it's some of the, analysts that are here at the player's disposal, but it's also junior and senior upperclassmen led moments where, hey, quarterbacks got to be out there with the receivers against DBs, getting some of those things going. And I see it going all day long. And as the day goes on, more and more guys are showing up. So it's an active Schembechler Hall. And I didn't even talk about what's going on in the weight room with Tress. There is some great work being done. And I was talking to Dave Abloff, and we were going through the schedule. This is the longest time, because of the way the academic calendar sets up, where they're starting spring ball, how they're able to push the spring game back a little bit further into April, that they've had between the end of playing an actual game and the start of spring ball. For young players, early enrollees, freshmen, sophomore, all the way up, but anybody that needs to be able to add weight, add strength, add speed, add quickness, this is the longest time a lot of these guys who have been on campus for more than 1 year have had to do that. And I go back to my experience in college football, coming in as a tight end. I needed a maximum amount of time from when we played in the Holiday Bowl to when we started spring ball. I was making that transition to offensive line. I had to be in the weight room. I had to be in the meeting rooms. I had to be watching film. And this is a great opportunity. There's a lot of work being done in the weight room right now.
And hopefully this is the longest stretch that Michigan will have in that gap for a long, long time, because we're looking deep into January now for the college football playoff. The national championship game in a few years, I think, is like January 25th, 26th, 27th. So hopefully this is the longest gap as Michigan finished the 2024 season on the final day of 2024 this past year. All right, number 2 on our 7 from 77. Just a reminder, we'll have plenty of spring practice coverage. Really, it'll get going in 2 weeks. We'll be back with a live stream here. Next week, a special guest. John sat down a long conversation with Chad Henne. Can't wait to share that one with you next week. And then we'll really rev up our spring ball coverage in 2 weeks. Today, we're talking about the Wolverines, now come and gone, who are gearing up for Sundays in the NFL. We start with Michigan's Big Four, who many expect will be on Thursday in the NFL draft as first-round selections. And most of them have not participated in much, if at all, of the full NFL draft gauntlet, the showcases, the underwear Olympics, whatever you want to call them. Your impressions where things stand, and a lot of it just kind of hearsay and mock drafts and projections for the Big Four: Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland.
So Mason Graham didn't work out. I mean, I think he did the bench, but he didn't run at the combine. He did weigh in. And I can't tell you how many text messages I got about when he weighed in. A lot lighter than was in the program throughout the course of the season. I think he was in the program at about 320, and I think he weighed in at 298. And that to me is a little bit of a concern. Now, it doesn't mean that you look at his frame and whether or not a agent, trainer, time of year, he's been putting in a lot of speed work, trying to, show off the 40 or whatever he's done. 20 pounds for football players, offensive or defensive linemen, that's not a big deal. I know it seems like it's for a lot of people, the average individual, you lose 20 pounds and you're like, hey, rock and roll. I could get into a bathing suit. I could go shirtless, whatever it is. Not me, but there are individuals that lose 20 pounds and that could be a big deal. But when you're talking about a football player, I mean, what the combine was, 2 weeks ago, pro day is going to be at the end of next week. Now you're looking at the fact that it's, 20, he might be up 25 pounds from where he was. And so I'm not as concerned as long as that 298 doesn't go to 295 next time he weighs in, that it goes back up to, 310, 315. That's where he's going to need to be by the time he starts, playing real football next fall.
Well, hey, Jalen Milroe's hand size went up, more than a half inch. So Who knows? There's some weird
measuring issue.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely need to reevaluate there.
Down in Alabama, I think they go centimeters, and I think they just must have misread it. Whereas everybody else is using, the imperial chart. Anyway,
I think if it was 9 centimeters versus 9 inches, that could be a problem holding a football. And
yes. Well, but it does show growth. It does show growth. But when again, talking about the Big Four, Kenneth Grant, I think, is the next one that you brought up. And Kenneth wanted to run. He went to the combine with all intentions of running, but then they found out, I think through testing, that he had a minor hamstring strain, so he chose not to run.
I think he could have potentially benefited the most from going through everything at the combine. To me, Grant not being able to do the combine was disappointing. Other times it's strategic or just genuinely because of an injury from the season. I think Kenneth Grant could have really helped his stock if you see that dude that size with the way he can move.
Yeah, and so some of it is it's a holding pattern, right? As long as he can run it at pro day, scouts, they don't care if it happens at the combine or pro day. I like the opportunity, any chance you get to go and take care of your opportunity first. I like it more. Let me put out a time at the combine, and if that time is acceptable or if it's excellent, then I don't have to do it at the pro day. I could just simply work on skill drills and interviews and concentrate on other things. But there's a lot of different ways you can skin that one. So when I look at it and I say Kenneth Grant in a holding pattern, he's going to, if he can run, he's going to all the physical traits. As big as he is, he's going to run a really nice 40 time. He's going to, all the 3-cone drill, the circle drill, all those different things, he's going to absolutely master. So his stock will be just fine. The question about him is he polished enough to come in and be a day one starter, every down guy? And I don't know that he is. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber defensive tackle. But I think there's a lot of teams, franchises that if you're drafting high, unless it's a trade and you got a draft pick of a team that really sucks, then you're in need of guys that are contribute right now, which may take him off some boards in the top 10, maybe even the top 15. So I look for him to go more really late first. I'll tell you my ideal fit in just a few moments about all four of these guys. But I really see him being somewhere between 17 and 28, 29, simply because of development. And, there was some games this year where I wish he would have played a little bit lower, had some more numbers, although he is playing next to a numbers king in Mason Graham. So there's a lot of factors involved there. Will Johnson, now that there is some concern about Will Johnson. Only played half the season, hasn't played a complete season since he's been in Ann Arbor, and wasn't able to perform at the combine. Now there are indications he may not run at pro day as well. Durability will be a question because he does play a physical brand of football. Is he able to withstand the wear and tear of a 17-game season, couple of preseason games, postseason play? That's going to be a question. And is there going to be a team early on in the draft that wants to take a quote-unquote flyer? Because he's got top 5 talent, but availability is a trait. And if you don't have, that's not one of your strong suits, you start sliding down draft boards. If they're not able to actually see you run and, lay hands and lay eyes on you, you'll start dropping down some draft boards. So I think he's still going to be somewhere between 12 and 18 because he's such a high-end talent. Somebody in that range will be able to take him, and they're going to get themselves a steal. I think there are times where he's going to miss some games simply because I mentioned already, he's a physical style of player. You're going to get some bumps and bruises, some dings, but he's going to be a productive professional. And then Colston Loveland, this one, he actually had a doctor's note, all right, not to perform at the combine. He was wearing his sling, which I thought was a great touch. And I don't think he's going to be able to really he'll be able to run, but he's not going to press. He's not going to do all that stuff. So for him, it's turn the film on. And I think he is going to be a guy that goes somewhere between, just simply because it's a position issue. He's a tremendous talent. He'll probably go somewhere between 15 and 25. 15, I think, would be on the real high end. But, the possibility is there 15 to 25 for Colston Loveland.
Interesting. I've seen him mocked several times to the Colts at 14. We'll talk about that. I want to go player by player. Number 3 on our 7 from 77. Ideal landing spots. And it's easy to say, oh, it'd be great if all these guys played for insert contender here. But there's also a big monetary change in being the number 5 pick versus being the number 15 or 20 pick. So blending all of that, let's start with Mason Graham. He is consistently mocked as the top Michigan Wolverine off the board. Your perfect fit for Mason Graham.
I think the perfect fit is the New England Patriots. And I mean, it's at 4, so he's going to maximize his earning potential as early as possible in his career. But when you've got Mike Vrabel, who's a defensive-minded head coach, and you look at what they've done in free agency, they've gone out and they spent some money defensively. You got a coach that knows, hey, we've got a young quarterback. We got to continue to develop him. And just the team itself. I think Drake May is going to be a star in this league. So you've got yourself a quarterback. If you can get on a team with a very young quarterback, you're going to win a lot of games. And as a defensive tackle and a guy that's a great run stopper, I think that's where he would really excel, especially in the type of defense that Mike Vrabel likes to run. You're going to get some preferential treatment from the head coach if you're on the defensive side of the ball. It's only natural. And I also like the fact that he could stick it to Mike Vrabel every time Michigan beats Ohio State.
Well, that is one thing. We talk about the respect of the players who played in this game. I think Mike Vrabel would love having a guy like Mason Graham, even if they went to very different universities.
Oh, when you're in the NFL, as soon as you leave your alma mater, that doesn't matter to NFL coaches, doesn't matter to general managers, doesn't matter to teammates. In fact, it's probably a positive because, and I loved having said this before, teammates that played at Penn State, Ohio State, all the big programs, even though they're great rivals and it's fun in the locker room and you can have some banter back and forth, they've been in the biggest moments. They've been tested more than a lot of other players coming out of college football. So, they're a much more known quantity and they understand pressure. They understand what it means to win, how important it is, and the work to go in. Not that they don't at other programs, but it's at a different level when you're coming from one of those top programs. So for Mike Vrabel, he would love to get his hands on Mason Graham.
Any chance Mason falls out of the top 10? Feels like maybe 7 might be his floor.
I would say depending on trades, that's always the wild card. Out of the top 10, that's not going to happen. But depending on what happens, the lowest I could ever see him going would be, I don't think he gets past Jacksonville. I don't think he gets past the Raiders at 6. Maybe if he does, and they're not, they're teams that don't stay there, which is not going to have 6 trades in the first 8, but there's no way he gets past the Panthers at 8. He's just too great of a value at that point.
Well, I think it's pretty fascinating with the former Lions defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. Remember, the start of the Lions rebuild was Penei Sewell at 7 overall, and it felt like Sewell. Now that ended up being a pretty good draft at the top, right? There was a discussion: how in the world could the Bengals pass on Penei Sewell? Well, they got Jamar Chase. That worked out just fine. It'd be pretty interesting if a guy who I think everybody has in their top 5, if he were to slip to 7 and start the foundation along the front for Aaron Glenn in New York, that would be, I think there might be a similar Brad Holmes-esque fist pump from Aaron Glenn.
There could be. There very well could be, although they need a lot of help on that offensive line.
100%.
So,
how about Kenneth Grant?
That new Buckeye they got.
That's right. Kenneth Grant, what to you is the ideal? You kind of prefaced it. Is it nearby?
Well, yes. The perfect fit would be the Detroit Lions. And I would love to see him play for the Detroit Lions. I think he fits the mentality. I think he fits the defense perfectly. And it's a situation where he would be allowed time to develop. He'll definitely get his reps as a rookie, no question. But with Lee McNeil and DJ Reader, you got 2 vets in there that are going to take the starting reps. And you know what? He may actually start early on if Lee McNeil's not healthy. But in the long haul, to be able to sit behind a couple of guys and still get your time, be able to glean some of their knowledge, their experience, and what they're doing, how they prepare as a pro, how they get ready for games, how they practice, how they work out, all of those different things, I think would be just a perfect fit. So really anywhere that Kenneth Grant could go and be in a good rotation up front with some vets. And I just picked Detroit just because, check out the hat, I'm a hometown guy, and I just simply want to see him here in Detroit. I could pick Detroit for almost any of these guys.
Sure.
But, you know, I don't think he lasts to 28. It's possible. And I know I mentioned 15. The highest I really see him going as probably 16 to the Cardinals, but I know that they added some defensive help up front in free agency. So somewhere 16 to 28, 29 is probably where he ends up going.
I still think he's got some upward mobility if he's able to participate fully in pro day or close to fully and put up some monster numbers with his size, with that length that he possesses. We'll see. Will Johnson, perfect fit. Obviously, I mean, he was a guy who, midway through this past season, he was being mocked in the top 5. That slipped a bit. Where do you think works out well for him?
I see Will, you know, it's really going to be who runs a defense that he would fit well in regards to being able to play man. I don't like any rookie, and Sauce Gardner is kind of an anomaly, he is an anomaly where he just comes in and he shuts everybody down. Will could have that potential, but he doesn't have the same amount of reps, the same amount of time because he's been injured. So I'd look for a place like, you know, the Raiders. I know they're not picking in the middle of the round, but if they were to trade out of that 6th spot because there's, you know, no quarterback that they need now, since they got Geno. So and here I kind of mentioned in passing all of these different things that just happened in the past couple of days with the, you know, legal tampering period. All of the needs are going to shift. And all of the mock drafts that came out, the way too earlys and those that happened before and after the combine, they're all going to change because, you know, if a general manager is drafting for team need, it could eliminate what they did in free agency, what they're going to do in the draft. Now, if they're just simply drafting on potential and talent, now all of that's a different decision. So I look for a team like the Raiders, you know, possibly the Jets. If Aaron Glenn were to fall in love with him, you know, they moved on from Reed. Obviously, he's here in Detroit. And can you imagine a defense with Sauce on one side, Will Johnson on the other? That it might be a bit of a stretch with where they're picking, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, you can't draft for need, but with all the needs the Jets have, I'd be very surprised especially if they stayed put at 7,
right?
If they went corner. But yeah, I've heard the 49ers for him a few times. Again, just mock drafts. None of this. You can't believe anything, but I think that's an intriguing one, especially because just from the standpoint of of a franchise that's done really good work, that had a down year. There aren't many organizations where if you're taken in the top 10 to 12 picks, you feel like you can contend for a Super Bowl next year. But if you are drafted to the 49ers, that's a realistic expectation because of where they've been outside of last season.
Yeah, I mean, another couple of teams just come to top of mind as well is, you mentioned the Niners. They've moved on from some of their secondary help, and they're going to be looking. Also, Dallas. I could see Dallas being in the market. They've been very underwhelming for a number of years in free agency. They're bound a little bit by the big contracts that they gave to CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott. Terrible contract, but they're dealing with it. So they need cheap available talent, and I think Will would provide that for sure.
How about Colston Loveland, his ideal fit?
Colston, you mentioned it. The highest you think he goes would be 14 to the Colts. I think it would be a great fit if they're looking to give their young quarterback a great, reliable target, open up that offense a little bit more. We all know that he could throw the ball downfield, and they just signed Daniel Jones to compete. And I'm drawing a blank on his name. The quarterback, the young quarterback for Indiana. Yeah, Anthony Richardson. We know he's got a strong arm, and one of the things is he can hit the deep ball, but they really didn't have a lot of that mid-range underneath help. Colston Loveland would fit the bill there. If he is on the board, the ideal fit for him, and I would hate this just because it would just be the rich getting richer, is if you're looking at a Kansas City Chiefs team that wants to spend some draft capital and move up. He's not going to be there at 31, but if they wanted to groom the next great tight end, Colston Loveland would definitely be somebody I think that they would love to pair up with Patrick Mahomes whenever their big dog retires.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of a team in that same division, Denver at 20, being a potential option for him. We all know what Sean Payton has done with tight ends in the past, Jimmy Graham being the main example in New Orleans. Let me ask you this. I think a lot of people have Tyler Warren as the top tight end in this class, but Colston Loveland is significantly younger. Tyler Warren had a really good year last year, but it's not like he had these gaudy numbers. I think they're different players, no doubt. Yep. It's depending on how you want to use a tight end. Warren, I think, is pretty clearly a better run blocker at this point. But if you had the pick of the litter, would you prefer Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren?
I think Colston Loveland, if you want to throw the ball, I think he provides more of an opportunity down the field. I think Tyler Warren, and I know this is something that Colston has worked on. He's talked about it many times with us, that it was about setting the edge, and he did a better job this year. Wasn't asked to do it a lot because he was banged up a little bit, and they've got they got Bredesen, Max in the backfield. They used as a blocker quite a bit. So here's the other one, and I know people will grin when I say this. If he's there when the Chargers pick, I don't know that Jim Harbaugh can pass on Colston Loveland.
If any of these four are there, people are going to assume that Jim Harbaugh is just going to snag them.
Okay, so let me ask you this. For the Chargers,
Kenneth Grant
is there along with Colston Loveland, because I know that he has said he's a gift from the football gods. They just re-signed Khalil Mack. I know that Joey Bosa is no longer there. They're not bad up front defensively, but we all know that he adores his quarterback. Last year, they went out and drafted Alt to protect their quarterback. Wouldn't he love to give him a weapon, Justin Herbert, to Colston Loveland?
Yeah, no doubt. I just believe that in round one, I think Jim Harbaugh prioritizes the very front versus a Colston Loveland type. Again, I'd love to see it because it would be fascinating if both Loveland and Grant were on, or, maybe Will Johnson really falls. I don't know. I don't expect that. But I think the funniest thing would be if we get the little trade ding as we're all watching on Thursday night at like 13 or something, and you've got three of these guys on the board, and the Chargers move up. Again, I don't anticipate that, but Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Yes.
Whatever
Who does he
Wolverine
love
is
the
left over.
most? He's picking between his children.
Oh man, the press conference would be great, and you'd be sitting there going, "Thank goodness I don't have to ask the questions."
Oh man, or a follow-up, or listen, or yes.
Or listen, come on, it's got to be great for you to be able to listen.
From the outside in, yes, absolutely. Yes.
There were some great conversations you had with Jim, and there were also a few that were, well, contractually obligated, if we should put it that way.
That's a great way to put it. Yes. Yeah,
All right.
contractually obligated on both
On
sides.
both sides, yeah.
Yeah.
No, those contracts were upheld barely.
Yes. Yes,
All
they
right. Number 4 on our 7 from 77. There will be other Wolverines who will make their way to Sundays, obviously. I want to talk about the other guys. We don't have to hit on every one of these players, but these are the ones who will start defensively, are going to be going through the process. They'll participate in Pro Day, or at least are scheduled to at this point. Kind of figured that outside the big 4, Josiah Stewart, the most likely to be the 5th Wolverine selected. But whether it's him or some of the other defensive prospects, Amir Hall, Keyshawn Harris, Quentin Johnson, Makari Page, Wesley Walker, the transfer that Michigan had last year. We'll throw in William Wagner here. I think he's going to find an opportunity in the NFL. Drafted, maybe not, because it's a long snapper, but give me a guy or two there that you're looking at who has a chance to kind of grow and build defensively.
Josiah Stewart. I think he is always going to be battling the undersized moniker. And will he be a 3 or 4 down guy in the NFL? Probably not. Maybe he can grow into it a little bit, but he's really going to be seen more as a pass rush specialist, and rightfully so. I mean, he's really good at it. And it may take him some years to earn the opportunity to be in there on some, first or second downs, depending on situations. But so in saying that, the highest he goes is probably, I want to say late second. It might also be the Wolverine talking in me, but I think
a day 2 selection is a good bar to try to shoot for him. If he hears his name on Friday, I think that's really good.
I think 3rd round is really where I see him going. And somebody's going to get a great opportunity to have a very productive edge player, and however they develop them, however they work them into it. And it really depends on the defense. I see him fitting the thing that I think is working in his favor. We already talked about the size working against him, but he could be an outside linebacker in an odd front. And playing for Wink and playing for this defense and Jesse Minter, we saw at times him drop, and he looked comfortable. It didn't look like it was his specialty, but I could see him doing that. But being an edge guy on a 3-4 front, I think he could excel as a pass rusher in that situation. It takes a little bit of pressure off being a run defender, but he's also a guy that you could put in a base 4-3 and just say, go get the quarterback. And so I think that versatility does allow him, and some of it's just the way the NFL has changed and grown over the past 5-6 years, makes him I think a solid pick in round 3. I don't know that any of those other guys, maybe Makari Page is a 6th or a 7th round pick. I think they all find roster spots as undrafted guys. I don't think there's anybody who's left without a spot to go for rookie minicamp, but Amir Hall, love what he did here. I still think there's just going to be questions about his, ability to play at the next level. He'll get a shot on somebody's roster. Maybe a guy that spends a little bit of time on the practice squad along with Wesley Walker and Quentin Johnson and the rest of the cast of characters.
Number 5 on our 7 from 77. How about the offensive side? Donovan Edwards, Miles Hinton, Kalel Mullings, Josh Preeb, the 4 offensively outside of Colson Loveland. Any thoughts on any one or two of those guys in particular?
Well, I think Donovan Edwards is probably your highest drafted out of them, and some of it is just simply on potential and the multiple positions that he can play. I think sometimes a little underutilized in the pass game. And to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, he can be used in that situation. So I see him being probably most likely like a 5th or 6th Depending on, what a team sees in terms of the potential, could jump up to 4. I think that would be the best that he can hope for. Khalil Mullings, probably 6th or 7th. And I was surprised that he didn't run at the combine. And so it's one of those things where you're kind of like, what was he thinking? And he just needs to show that he's got the quick feet. He's got the speed. He's got the athletic ability, the agility, the athletic score that they like to put together, which I think he does. And so he's probably a very late day 3, possibly undrafted. Miles Hinton, I think he's done everything he can, and I see him going to a place. And I top of mind, I think Washington after the Laramie Tunsil trade. That would be a position where he could go, he could develop, he could back up both sides. He could even be a backup to guards, but they don't need him to perform right away. In a pinch, he could go in and get you out of a tough spot. But as a day 1 starter, he's not that type of, he's just not there yet. But I think he could eventually get to a, platooning at a spot, work his way into a starting spot in 3 or 4 years.
All right, so number 6 on our 7 from 77. You gave us one Hinton to the Commanders. Any 1 or 2 guys outside the big 4, if you could place them in a situation, just team-wise, we're not going to talk about, we all want them to get drafted as high as they possibly can at the upward bound of that. But just player to team, do you have another perfect fit or 2?
I do. Going over my notes, I want to pick the one or 2 that I kind of like the most. Josiah Stewart. I could see him being a Raven or an Eagle. I could see him in Detroit as well, but I think those are a couple of defenses where they don't need him to come in, and maybe the Eagles are looking at it as we need somebody to replace Sweat, who just went out to Arizona. And the Ravens, I just think he fits, and he'd be very comfortable in that defense. Same style that they played here. Obviously, that's where the OG is from, and all those different things. But I think he would be a great fit in either of those systems, and be productive early. I think the Eagles are one of those teams. Howie Roseman, I think, is the best general manager in the NFL right now. His eye for talent, how he can get guys to fit into different spots. And sees the talent, sees how they would fit in their scheme. I think he's got a great eye for that. So I think that'd be a great one. Donovan, I'd actually, as much as I dislike this team, it's kind of the Buckeyes of the NFL. I could see him being a Cowboy. And they need a guy that can be very versatile in the backfield. And Dak needs somebody that he can step up at protection. It's not a specialty, but he can be a guy that can leak out late to dump the ball off too. He's got a good sense downfield of where the defense is going, how he fits in terms of being able to throw him the ball. But he could also be a change of pace in the backfield.
I look at Donovan as a guy, if he could go to a place where there is a really established RB1, but not a clear path for an RB2. I think he needs that year. I think he benefited a great deal from learning from Blake Corum. I look at the Colts behind Jonathan Taylor with not a whole lot behind him. Derrick Henry, another year older in Baltimore. Saquon Barkley with Philly. Kenneth Gainwell's getting a little bit older. They drafted Will Shipley last year. I'd love to see him almost have a redshirt year under one of the best running backs in football to try to learn. Because we all know the pass catching ability is there. We just didn't see it a ton this past season.
Yeah.
I think he'd really benefit from that NFL red shirt where you sprinkle him in here and there, and then maybe he can pull a 2022 and have your RB1 go out, and then he could take the baton and go like he did down the stretch.
Yeah. I think that runway is probably a little longer in Philly.
Sure.
And I could also see him going to a place like Pittsburgh, where they do want to utilize their running back and they want to beat the hell out of their running backs. That's what they do, right? And they're going to need more than one. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where these guys go. And our team's drafting for need. And if I don't think he goes undrafted, that's where I see, if you're going to be 5th, 6th, 7th round, especially 7th round, I would at that point almost rather be undrafted, because now you could pick a situation like you're talking about. And if Philly called up and said, hey, We'd love to have you come in, be RB2. We didn't want to spend a draft pick on it. We don't love our situation. We'll give you a chance to come in and earn that spot. I think it would be a great fit for him.
And it's easy to say, oh, well, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, but with them just signing Najee Harris to a 1-year deal, that would be another interesting fit. The reality is there are a ton of really good running backs in this draft. It is a strong and deep running back draft. So that certainly complicates things a little bit for Kalel and Dono. Number 7 on our 7 from 77. For our audio only listeners, we will have a great conversation John had with the newest member of Michigan's staff, assistant wide receivers coach Jack Tuttle, of course, on the team last year, made a couple of starts. You'll get into the specifics with him, but what are the positives and the challenges to go directly from playing the game to now coaching the game, like Jack will now start here as of a few weeks ago?
Well, a lot of it comes down to perspective, communication, and just relationships. He's got relationships with quarterbacks, with some of the receivers that are here, and they all know that he was just wearing the pads just a few months ago. And so you have a certain way of, okay, this is what coach is saying. Sometimes players they're not always on the same page. If you have that intermediary, that's a big one. I can't spell it. I shouldn't use it. If you have that middle guy that can decipher what the coach is saying related to the running back or related to the receiver or quarterback, now all of a sudden that's part of the value. His value is also in recruiting. He's gone through the transfer portal. I asked him about that in regards to, hey, you were at Indiana, you were at Utah, you went through this. When guys come to you and say, hey, what was it like? What was your experience? He has that firsthand knowledge to talk about. It's not always, the grass isn't always greener, or here's why I did it and it worked out for me. Here's the things I was thinking about, who I was talking to. So I think there's a lot of assets that he brings. And for him, I just think it's a great opportunity. When he came to Michigan, I sat down with him and A.J. Barner, 2 transfers from Indiana, and he was very clear. He knew that, hey, I'm coming in to study behind J.J. McCarthy. He was the starting quarterback, wanted to win a championship, check that box. Wanted to learn from Jim Harbaugh, from Sharon Moore, and possibly get on the coaching staff here when it was all said and done. And he set a path and he's following it.
Great stuff here on this 7 from 77 on the audio side. Let's get into our conversation with Jack Tuttle. Here on the video side of things, we certainly want to encourage fans to get in their questions, their comments, as we bring you some extra stuff. We went a little bit long on the 7 from 77, got about 15 minutes for that. John, I believe, if I'm correct here, is this intermediary what you were trying to say?
Yes. Thank you very much. What he said.
Yes, there it is there on the screen for you if you would, if you would like any help. That is per google.com.
That's one of them when you spell that you start it and you hope that one of the options that comes up is exactly what you're trying to say.
I really did think you were going to drive through. You said it. I knew where you were going, and then there was just that pause, that moment of, if this were a college football Saturday, you would have driven through it. But I think
I'll work on that for episode 501, 502, 501 didn't get done. 502 got to be better. Intermediary.
Right. Yes. Our buddy Paul asking about audio and video continuing on YouTube. Yeah, I think we're in a pretty consistent off-season plan of every other Tuesday. So no stream next Tuesday. We should be back on March 25th. That is, as we'll talk about in a little bit, maybe a little bit thrown off by hopefully a Sweet 16 run for Michigan men's basketball based on my travel, but we'll learn more about that here come Selection Sunday and all of that. But yes, our plan is to continue to bring you YouTube videos. We're trying to expand this portion, so any way you can spread the word, share thoughts, what you'd like to see on here. We're going to keep the audio feed going, no doubt. I am an audio podcast. I'm obsessed. I love them, but I also love watching videos on YouTube along these lines. So however we can try to expand it, that's what we're going to try to do here in 2025. John, I kind of wanted to talk through with you. We hear a lot about spring practice and spring ball and all of it. What are some similarities and differences from a spring practice versus something in fall camp or a game week? And how do you as a player, especially a young player, kind of perceive that you're trending in the right direction at this time, where I'm sure there's more opportunities for younger players in the spring, because it's much more of a wide open canvas, isn't it?
It is. And so how do you know you're making progress? Well, you get more reps. And you get more opportunity, and then you get feedback, and you're able to build on that from practice 3 to practice 4. And then what does it look like at practice 8? By the time it's all said and done, you're playing in the big house for the spring game. What does that look like? It adds another element. Fans are there, TV's there, radio is obviously there. We'll make sure we broadcast that one. And it builds on itself. So if you're getting more opportunity, then yes, you're doing the right thing. You're getting more feedback. You continue to do the things that you're doing. And the way that the practices are structured, you still want to have your competitive periods where you have 9-on-7 full run. You have 1-on-1 pass pro. You have 7-on-7 for the skill guys. But you're going to have longer individual periods where you're working more on specific techniques and you're installing the offense. Now, a lot of the guys that are here, and this is a little bit different this year because Chip Lindsey, new offensive coordinator, there'll probably be some new concepts, as there are every year. There might be some change in terminology. So it's more of a blanket, hey, we want to make sure everybody's on the right page, but it's for the younger players as well. And you want to make sure that this is where you've got to hone your technique. You've got to master your craft. And it continues throughout the summer. It continues throughout the regular season. But this is where you can see the biggest gains. So coaches are they're going to try and nail down footwork, hand placement, techniques, defensive backs when you're opening your hips, all those different things, the timing of everything. That's where you want to hone in on individually. And then DBs working together, much like the offensive line. You've got to be working in unison. You've got to be able to communicate. All of those things will be worked on more in individual groups and different sides of the ball, offensive walkthroughs at times, to be able to make sure that you're all on the right page so that when you get to the competitive periods, they can actually be competitive, that you're protecting your quarterback so he can throw the ball, so you can see the routes, you can see the defensive coverages, all those different things. So yeah, you're going to spend more individual time. The start of practices, which is when all that's done, is going to be a little bit longer. At the competitive periods, maybe cut down a little bit, just especially at the beginning of spring practice.
Some players you're excited to see this spring. We talked about some potential kind of depth chart breakdowns over the last few weeks here on the show, but if you had to pinpoint a few guys that you really can't wait to get out there and watch pop the pads, who would they be?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you said pop the pads, because I want to see the heat-seeking missile known as Brandon Hillman. He got a lot of more time at the end of the season than he did at the beginning of the season. We all saw what he did to the running backs against Indiana, the receivers against Indiana. Legal, physical, violent. And yes, it is okay to be violent in the game of football. And I just want to see his next steps in coverage. How can they use him in different creative ways? Because he's got a very good and unique skill set. He's one of them. On offense, obviously, I'm going to be looking at the offensive line, Andrew Sprague. A lot of excitement surrounding him. He's been in the weight room. He's put on a little bit of weight, watching his footwork. We had a chance to see him against Alabama at right tackle. I want to see how he's grown, how he's developed. So a lot of the young guys, Blake Frazier, one of those as well. I think they may actually be competing for both of those, that right tackle spot. And then, a young guy, Balaboa, the offensive lineman that came, only 2 years of football, but he was a basketball recruit before that. He's got all the tools, and I'm just excited to see what he looks like in pads. What type of pad level does he play with? Is he that good of an athlete? I see him walking around here, and he's a physically imposing individual. Now I want to see it with pads on, see what he looks like in some of those one-on-run drills. Because I really don't think pass pro is going to be an issue, but I do want to see what he can do in the run game, because we all know that's going to be a huge part of this offense. Some other, obviously, Demetrius Underwood. Bryce Underwood. Yeah, sorry, wrong generation. Bryce Underwood. I want to see. I just want to see what he looks like. I want to see how he plays, handles the offense, controlling the offense. I revert back to my time where, how does he handle the huddle?
Sure.
They don't huddle up anymore. How does he handle making sure everybody is in the right position at the right time. You get the right personnel group and you get the right splits. It's not something that happens overnight. And so he's put in a lot of time in the meeting rooms with the coaches. I want to see that translate from up here down on the field. So I think that's one that everybody is wanting to see, and especially in the spring game.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned some of the offensive line. P. Maximus commenting in just about the offensive line play this past season. I think we all kind of knew there was going to be some evolution to the O-line from 23 to 24, just with the fact that Michigan lost their top 6 guys up front. Would you classify last year as a disappointment, and how does Michigan improve in that area for 2025? I imagine spring and then the potential spring portal season could have a huge impact on that.
Yeah, it was a disappointment. There's no way to work around that one. I expected a lot more out of Giovanni El-Hadi, and I've seen a sense of urgency with him in the weight room, working with Juan Castillo, with Grant Newsome, and I expect big things from him. And I know Josh Preeb came in, and I expected probably a little bit more from a veteran guy. And here's where I was most disappointed was, and Sharon shared this with us on the Monday night, Inside Michigan Football. Just the disappointment of not seeing some basic things like run through linebackers, having your head up. And, some of that's technique, some of it's trusting your technique, trusting the scheme, trusting your teammate, your line mate. And I just didn't see enough of that. You can't, Oregon, I go back to that game, the amount of times that linebackers ran through and it was either a TFL or it was rushing the quarterback early on in the season. Too much pressure on Davis Warren when he was the starting quarterback. I need to see a progression both mentally in understanding, what are my responsibilities? Do I have this gap? How do I make sure that I'm in that gap and I take the right footwork? What happens if, somebody shows up earlier than I anticipated? You got to trust yourself, trust your technique, and it's never going to go wrong. So, yeah, I was disappointed in the way that those 5 played up front.
We will answer any more last-minute questions, comments in the chat. Did want to talk about a little basketball here because there's a pretty good chance, John, Friday in Indy, another Janssen Bowl with Michigan and Purdue. Your takeaways from what you've seen before I share some of my thoughts, or what questions do you have for me on what has been a great season but a pretty underwhelming finish?
Well, underwhelming finish. And I guess the biggest thing that I want to know is, are they going to be able to get consistent guard play? And can we please, pretty please, if I ask really nice, can we stop turning the ball over?
Well, those are one and the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I've said since the fall that I believed Trey Donaldson was in so many ways the skeleton key for this team. Now, Vlad Golden's become this because I thought going into the season, there was only one guy who could really operate at the position that Trey Donaldson played, point guard, on the roster that we knew. The hope was that somebody would develop, and that hasn't quite happened. And then Vlad Golden, you thought, okay, well, at least you've got Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf plays so differently than Vlad. Vlad is the only one of his kind, and I thought it was really interesting for those who didn't catch it. I highly encourage you to listen to the radio replay of Inside Michigan Basketball. Dusty May said this week he's basically given Vlad Golden the assistant coach treatment in terms of substitutions. Vlad says when he's ready to come out, he needs a blow, and then he's right back in there. And he says, you tell me when you need out, and then you tell me when you're ready to go back in. And that's basically the substitution pattern. Trey Donaldson had that personal 7-0 run against Penn State in late January, and he hasn't really been the same since. The one half that Dusty talked about that is Michigan's last really good half was the first half at Indiana. That was 4.5 weeks ago. It was a long time since then. And Trey Donaldson has not been that. To me, if I could select one player to bust out of this recent slump, unquestionably, it's Trey Donaldson. He's got it in him. He's an emotional player. He's got that potential, but it's got to happen sooner rather than later because he is that from a turnover standpoint, from a scoring standpoint, and something that's underrated. He had 1 rebound against Michigan State. Dusty May systems want guards to rebound. You ask why Vlad Golden's rebound numbers aren't massive. He wants guards to rebound so that they can get out and push in transition. That hasn't happened enough with Trey.
Yeah, and I'll ask you this too, and sometimes I wonder this, especially at the end of the year, and you could see it from some of the guys, but who's the leader of this team?
It's Vlad, and probably Will Cheddar. I believe Vlad from just an on-court standpoint of who he has to be at his peak. I mean, he had to, I think it was 28 or 29 against Michigan State, and those were hard earned. From a verbal standpoint, it's Will Cheddar. And he's had a couple of tough games to finish the season, but he's the guy. Him and Namari have been through this before. They know what it's like to play in the Big Ten. And for Will, it was early in his career, but they were contending early on in his time here. But yeah, I do think that there's something to be said for right now. They're kind of going through it a little bit. And I think it's funny. I think Vlad and Will could kind of overlap in what you expect from them. Will's normally the verbal, emotional type leader, and Vlad is the lead by example guy. I think it would benefit Vlad to maybe get a little bit more verbal at times. He is a genuinely just crazy good dude. And Will, it'd be nice to see him shake off this recent little funk and hit a couple of threes in that. Because, I mean, gosh, the 3-point shooting, it has been night and day compared to early on in Big Ten play. And if they can just find a way to make 35%, because the 2-point shooting is still pretty good. It just hasn't gotten there, and it hasn't been there for 14 games now.
Yeah, it would be nice to see Will Cheddar be a part of that, especially as one of the guys who has been here the longest. A holdover from the Howard days, and as we all know, Cheddar make it all better.
Yes. Oh, there
you go.
I've tried. So the Cheddar wordplay I've tried is he's an energy spark. So I've said Cheddar G. What are your thoughts?
No,
please
no
Cheddar G.
Please don't say that again.
Oh, come on, man. Cheddar G.
No. I'm not about that one.
Oh, it's a shame. I really thought that could be a nice little NIL thing.
That could be.
Yeah. See? Starts with a TSCH like you would expect. The stat I found today in doing some prep for this weekend shows you just how much this has dropped off 3-point wise. It's this is not all Namari. This is on the flow of the offense, because Namari thrived when he was getting open looks. Namari is that spot up shooting threat that Michigan needs to hit shots, not necessarily create.
Right.
Through January 16th, Namari Burnett was shooting 51% from three. That was when Dusty May was clamoring for Namari to be, on the word efficient on Wikipedia. Yeah. Namari was 51% from three, and Michigan was shooting 38.4% from three. Since then, Namari's at 31, so a 20 percentile drop, and Michigan's at 26.8. And that's not a knock on Namari so much as it is just the fact that it was 71 threes before, 72 threes in terms of attempts after. Yeah. The looks are not as good consistently as they were then, and that's a whole flow of the offense thing.
Well, it is, and that's why I say guard play. And it's handling the ball, and it's being able to create those moments for guys where they need to be. It's opening the floor, it's spacing things out, it's getting the guys the ball where they can do the most with it. And I think defenses have adjusted, and now Michigan's offense kind of has to do the same thing, right? It's the move off the move. How do you adjust in a basketball offense to be able to create those, moments and opportunities for guys when the defenses have changed? And I think that's why, you look at the NCAA tournament. Now, some of it will just come down to seeding. A lot of it will come down to matchups, because whoever you play early on is not going to know you like the rest of the Big Ten. And they may not be able to match up with a couple of 7-footers in the way that Area 51 plays. They may not understand how Michigan can be hurt. And so I think there's some opportunity in the tournament when they finally get there.
Just find a way to win that first NCAA tournament game, because then Michigan will be facing likely a better seed. But trying to figure out Vlad and Danny in 36 hours in a hotel somewhere across the country is a heck of a lot more difficult than seeing that team over and over. And I know the Big Ten, you don't play these teams very much. It's crazy that Michigan only played 3 teams twice, and 2 of them are in this little mini pod to determine who Michigan plays on Friday, Purdue and Rutgers. That's a heck of a lot different when you're seeing, okay, we've advanced past insert, 14, 13 seed as a protected seed, and we've got to go up against Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, and here we are in this ballroom. So one more question before we get out of here, asking, do you think, John, that Giovanni El-Hadi is a starter? Do you think that he is the, let's say, an above average Big Ten guard starter?
I think he is a starter. Right now, I wouldn't say above average. I think he's right there from what we saw last year. Now, the job is going to be, how does he make himself an above average starter? Some of that just comes with experience. He got a ton of that last year. And what does he do with that? How does he evaluate himself? How does he make himself better? How does he utilize all those different things that I talked about earlier in the show about, Juan Castillo and getting together with this offensive line? He needs to see things better. He's got the talent. He can play with good pad level. He's plenty strong enough. He's got the footwork. But for him, it's just having the confidence of going in there, seeing it, and performing. And that's where I really want to see him take that next step.
Be sure to check out Wednesday's audio edition. Jack Tuttle, a great conversation, almost 20 minutes. Really excited to share that. John does great work with Jack there. Any final thoughts here, John Jansen, before we get out of here for another Tuesday stream?
I am just excited about getting practice going, and we are just merely, about 10, 11 days away from actual physical combat. And that's where I want to see these young players. I want to see these guys develop that physical violence. Let's see who we got to go out there and be more Brandon Hillmans, heat-seeking missiles at every single position.
Popping pads.
Let's go.
There you go. All right, for John, I'm Brian. We'll talk to you hopefully, maybe even hopefully not in 2 weeks, but we should be back in 2 weeks here on YouTube. Check out In the Trenches presented by Meyer on MGO Blue Podcasts.